Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a special occasion, as I have the honor of introducing someone who is not only a dear friend, but also an exceptional individual. They say that true friendships are rare, but when you find that special bond, it becomes a source of strength and inspiration. Let's give a warm round of applause for Michael and Jeremy in celebrating the beginning of their incredible.
Can grit really be explained through neuroscience? Sigmund Freud stressed the significance of grief work in 1917 to recoup the emotional energy invested in the deceased. This perception of the psyche as a conduit for subliminal life energies lasted until recently. Psychologists and neurobiologists began to investigate the nature of resilience, which means fast returning to normal functioning, comparable to how a steel beam bends under stress. However, our biology is more complicated than this comparison suggests. Resilience begins at a primordial level when the hypothalamus releases stress hormones like cortisol, which can damage hippocampal and amygdala brain cells. When confronted with danger, the brain launches a chemical cascade that results in response to defend or flee. Certain substances, on the other hand, can decrease this reaction, improving stress resilience. The hypothalamus secretes corticotropin-releasing hormone, which causes the pituitary gland and adrenals to secrete adenocorticotropin hormone and cortisol. Overuse can have long-term consequences. Scientists have discovered that some protective biochemicals such as DHEA and neuropeptide Y assist individuals in more easily switching off stress hormones. These compounds and defensive biochemicals have been shown to lessen anxiety in resilient people. Researchers at the Yale University-affiliated VA hospital discovered in 2000 that troops with greater blood levels of neuropeptide Y performed better during simulated interrogations and were less likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Delta Force B is a protein scientists found that protects mice and humans from stress caused by being alone or being threatened by aggressive mice. This protein is a molecular switch activating genes and driving protein synthesis. It is lacking in depressed people postmortem's brain tissue. A medication that decreases Delta Force B levels may protect against depression and increase resilience. It will, however, be some time before an energy drink containing resilience powder becomes reality. So what does the research say regarding grit and resilience? Researchers must use caution while investigating the 5-HTT gene, thought initially to be a significant resilience gene. According to research, people with expanded 5-HTT gene variants are more resistant to depression. Recent meta-analysis, however, have not found a relationship between the gene and depression caused by stressful life events. Resilience psychology could lead to new medications and more exact techniques for gauging responses to life changes. Face-to-face conversations with people going through personal crises will provide immediate insights into understanding their resilient self. George A. Bonanno, a psychologist at Columbia University, has researched the resilience of trauma survivors. He discovered that people adapt effectively to various conditions, including the death of a loved one, war, fear, or disease. Despite their belief that Freudian grief counseling was required to return mourners to normalcy, Bonanno and his colleagues discovered no evidence of mental wounds during their trials. This shows that psychological resilience prevails and that modern forms of bereavement therapy may cause more harm than help. Bonanno's research emphasizes the significance of comprehending the intricacies of human emotional responses to trauma and the potential for psychological resilience to be a potent healing tool. Researchers investigated the laughter in the study and discovered that mourners were sincere in their pain and in their delight. Several investigations have found this oscillation between despair and happiness. Researchers feel that sadness aids in grieving, yet relentless grief can be unbearable.
our brain circuitry stops us from becoming locked in an inconsolable psychological condition. Bonanno's research also discovered that in the early aftermath of a death, disease, or disaster, 1/3 to 2/3 of those polled exhibited minor symptoms that might be classified as trauma. Within 6 months, the number of people experiencing these symptoms was frequently reduced to less than 10%, including post-traumatic stress disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders of 1980, which limited the psychologist's scope, forcing researchers to focus on populations that met the formulaic classification of post-traumatic stress disorder. Bonanno conducted future research to investigate the emotions of persons who had not sought psychological assistance. He used latent growth mixture modeling to describe people's unusual reactions after a trauma event. This research collected diverse responses that did not easily fall into categories for healthy adaptation. Some participants engaged in self-enhancing bias, inflated beliefs of who they were and how they acted, and potentially narcissistic conduct. Others suppressed terrible thoughts and emotions. Others even convinced themselves that they could manage whatever life threw at them. Bonanno discovered that coping in an ugly way benefited not just the suffering, but also Bosnian civilians in Sarajevo and 9/11 victims. A New Orleans citizen, Fred Johnson, coped with Hurricane Katrina by assisting with the Superdome's post-storm rescue. According to Bonanno's research on resilience, childhood adversity can have long-term implications. Despite this, most adults' reactions to job loss and tidal surges demonstrate strength as the norm throughout adulthood. Resilience. One size doesn't fit all. According to the data, resilience is not universally understood, and it is critical to equip people to cope with emotional stress. Psychologists and humanitarian workers have frequently employed procedures such as acute incident stress debriefing to manage trauma symptoms. However, investigations conducted over the last 15 years have revealed that this practice is ineffective and may be harmful. Following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the World Health Organization advised against debriefing because they could make some victims even more uneasy. The positive psychology movement began in 1988 and was essential in establishing the Penn Resiliency Program, which effectively reduces depression and anxiety in children. The United States Army uses comparable measures for over 1 million soldiers and their families, with 800,000 soldiers using an online global assessment tool and attending training seminars to improve emotional resilience. Every month, 150 troops visit the University of Pennsylvania to teach others in the military how to be resilient. The absence of proof for the program's success raises concerns about whether stress inoculation training may cause more harm than good. A survey of 1,600 soldiers, half of whom had at least one deployment to Iraq or Afghanistan, discovered that 85% of those who were rated resilient as evaluated by the absence of trauma symptoms. There is little evidence for preventative resilience training, and the entire military has not embraced universal resilience training. Instead of introspective probing into psychopathological reactions, the National Center for PTSD has devised a strategy to boost a person's coping abilities. Psychological first aid, which focuses on practical managing aspects, has successfully treated people with post-traumatic stress disorder. The new science of resilience indicates that one size does not fit all when dealing with what life throws at us. Sometimes the worst happens, but our intrinsic ability to recover means that everything usually works out fine.